What is going on, everyone? Griffin here, coming at you with some chalk gameplay. Today we're going to be talking about the massive D40 nerf that happened in the BV hotfix that came out on Friday. So let's head over and let's talk about it. So as you can see here, this is from the patch notes for that Friday hotfix that came out, and there is a very interesting thing here about the D40C in particular. So for the D40C, on to the next meta. If 25% lower DPS isn't enough, we'll make like this meme and continue nerfing. The fire rate was reduced from 750 rounds per minute down to 600 rounds per minute. Now, I know that in the past, traditionally, I've talked about SMGs in one way or another. And I want to preface this information by letting everybody know that, like, whenever the SMG changes started originally happening and kind of a re-identification of the identities for the weapons, I was very much in favor of something like this, because for the longest time most of the SMGs felt very similar. It felt like there was some specific drawbacks to some of them. There wasn't enough things in place to differentiate one from another, right? It was more or less like what has better ammo capacity, what has better range. There's different reasons why the meta has continuously shifted from various SMGs, whether it be the fire rate of the weapon, the magazine size of the weapon, the accuracy of the weapon, the range of the weapon. There's been many different reasons why this whole SMG meta has moved around. When they were talking about, giving the SMGs their own unique identity, that is definitely something that I am in 100% support of, because currently at the moment, there doesn't really feel like there is that much of an identity for a lot of the weapons in the game. Feels like they're kind of copy and paste, with like the only real variation is like fire rate or magazine capacity, things that we talked about before. When they reverted the SMG changes, I've had a very hard stance on like the SMG changes were reverted and they were actually made better, and because of this meta is going to continue, and it's going to continue until something very significant happens to the SMGs to try to break this meta up just a little bit. Now with the D40 nerf, they dropped the fire rate of this weapon from 750 rounds per minute down to 600 rounds per minute. And I don't know if anybody has used this weapon since this nerf has happened, but it feels like it fires about as quickly as the Knight or the LMPX. The LMPX may like beat it out by just a little bit, but that's pretty much what it feels like. There wasn't any adjustments done to the actual bullet damage for the body or for the head. There wasn't anything done about the actual range of the weapon. It all came down to the fire rate of the weapon. Now, the problem with nerfing the fire rate of any of the weapons, as we've seen in the past with Rogue Company, is when you adjust their fire rate down, if you lower the fire rate of the weapons, then in turn you are buffing the accuracy of the weapons, right? So for the Hydra, whenever they lowered the fire rate of that weapon down, then yes, it was something that was a little bit less reliable in hip fire 1v1 gunfights because of the accuracy changes that they did make to the hip fire. But in turn, it made it very, very accurate at longer ranges and made it something more akin to a DMR as opposed to an assault rifle. That's why I made the video about the Hydra kind of getting shadow buffed, because it did make it 10 times more accurate than it was before, and it allowed people to really do some crazy things whenever you are ADSing it at longer ranges. With the D40, it's very much a similar type of idea here. You are going in and you are reducing the fire rate, which in turn is making it a more overall accurate weapon. Now the problem with that comes from a complete meta shift from being something that has high DPS, has very, very high damage output, that pendulum swinging back in the direction of the LMPX territory, where you're prioritizing range and also accuracy as opposed to DPS, damage output, and things like that. Now, the community could sway things in one way or another. It just kind of depends on how they decide to pick this ball up and run with it as far as what the next meta SMG is going to go to, because I do think that there are a couple of viable options. But the D40 is no longer in contention currently on the high damage output side of that pendulum. I definitely feel like this is something that is very akin to the LMPX at the moment. It may be better than the LMPX. And My stance on SMGs overall as how they should be addressed and how they should be tuned is I don't want, and a lot of people out there I know think this, but I don't want the SMGs to be completely butchered. I don't want the SMGs to be something that is completely unusable in the game. I don't want the SMGs to be something that nobody ever picks, uses, gravitates to, unless it's their first time playing the match. I want everything to be balanced. That's my standpoint on it. I want everything to be balanced. The developers going in there and trying to work an identity for the SMGs out and then reverting all the changes isn't balanced. We were promised that they would be balanced, but they weren't balanced. So in my opinion, they need to do a better job at looking at the class overall as a whole, kind of like what they were, attempting to do early on, and then taking that information and data and see what can they do to make these weapons better. Now, this is my proposed change to the D40 nerf, because right now the D40 is it's not unplayable. You can still use it, you can still run it, you can still be successful, but you have to run it basically as like an assault rifle / DMR type weapon at this moment. You can't run it as a RNG run and gun, mow everybody down and have 40 bullets and all this crazy stuff. You have to run it as a little bit more reserved. You have to pick your gunfights, you have to pick your times to shoot people, because you're definitely not downing anyone whenever they're moving from one piece of cover to another piece of cover, unless that piece of cover they're moving to just happens to be on the other side of the map. So my proposed changes on this would be revert the fire rate of the weapon. Okay, right now, currently in that optimal range for the D40, you're doing 15 body damage, right? So my suggestion is to either drop that body damage down to either 13 or 12. So currently at 15 body damage, it takes 7 shots to down someone if you are just hitting their body with that weapon. Now, if this was something that was dropped down to 13, we're looking at 8 body shots to down someone. If we're looking at dropping this down, it's 9 body shots to down someone. So we have to look at this logically for a second. The D40 has access to 40 bullets right out of the gate. So basically you're going to be dropping it down by 2, possibly 3 damage in order to up that bullet count that you need to down someone by either 1 or 2. Also, on top of this, those damage fall off ranges, specifically at that first threshold, really needs to be reduced from a 90% overall damage down to something more akin to 75 or maybe even 60% of overall damage. It's an SMG, it's not an assault rifle. You shouldn't be having mid-range engagements with any of the weapons other than the IBEX and the LMPX where you do 90% total bullet damage. That just doesn't seem logical, it doesn't seem feasible, and that alone is what makes a lot of these SMGs feel absolutely broken at the moment, especially with the way the D40 was performing and the way that the Knight is currently performing. If they would do that, if they would drop that body shot damage of the D40 down by 2 to possibly 3 damage and increase the TTK of it just slightly so that people don't feel like they're getting absolutely annihilated by this weapon, and adjust that first fall off threshold and do that first fall off threshold to all of the SMGs except for the IBEX and the LMPX, then I feel like the SMGs would be almost in the best position that they could possibly be in. They would have to go in there and make small, minute changes to like body damage to specific guns, but overall it would actually put the SMGs in a better state. Currently, the D40 is not something that I would recommend running. I think that the community is going to gravitate more towards probably the SLC. In my opinion, the Knight is now the be-all, end-all SMG. It has been for a very long time, but now it feels like it is finally at that point where it can actually shine. So I do feel like the community is going to gravitate either towards the Knight for a very heavy-hitting, downable, for a very heavy-hitting, reliable, accurate, long-range SMG. A lot of the other community that enjoyed running the D40 is going to gravitate to either the SLC or the LMPX. And then depending on what the next move the developers make, then we will see another, of course, continuous meta shift. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Currently, I feel like the D40 is still usable. It's not like competitive. It's not in the spot that it needs to be in. I offered better suggestions to the developers. What I'm telling you guys is what I offered them, and hopefully they will take this into consideration, go back to the drawing board, and hopefully make the gun a little bit better. My job going into this, and the way I look at things, is to not butcher weapons, is to not make weapons unplayable, to not make weapon classes unplayable. To me, this feels like something that should have realistically been done a while back and kind of worked up and tuned up when they were doing the original SMG changes. But unfortunately, the community was not happy about that, so they reverted everything. But be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. What do you think of the D40 changes? Do you feel like that the D40 could actually have that fire rate reverted back and then the damage values adjusted slightly to make it a little bit more competitive and a little bit more balanced? Or do you think that it's fine where it's at and you're ready for the next weapon to come in until they start buffing stuff? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Also, be sure to check that description for links to Facebook, Discord, and Twitter. Those are the places to contact me. If you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. If you've already subscribed to the channel, then consider hitting that join button to become one of the 256 crew members. Lastly, on Thursdays starting around 11 p.m. Central Time, Sundays at 10 a.m. Central Time, I will be streaming here on YouTube. So if you are interested and available, please feel free to stop by and say hello there. Thanks for watching, guys.